Thank you for auditing Professor Skye's Record Review, the always positive new music review show hosted by a French professor who's a little bit surprised that he's going to be reviewing the album Songs by Adrianne Lenker. You see, in order to review something, there's sort of three criteria that I have. Number one, I have to have the time to review it. In the week that it came out, there were at least 3 albums that I wanted to review, so this one kind of fell by the wayside. Number two, I have to really like it. I don't give negative reviews on this channel, and I listened to it and I thought it was okay, but I just kind of dismissed it. And then I kept on getting sort of requests to review it, so I listened to it again, and each time I just sort of say, yeah, it's okay. Some guitar, some singing, it's all right. And then the third thing is the sort of biggest block that I had to reviewing this album, which was I had to have something to say about it. I don't want to just say, it's good. I want to have some kind of angle or something that makes it interesting for you to watch. And, I don't know the Dirty Projectors, the band that she's from. I am the Rip Van Winkle of music, so between 2002 and 2018, I paid basically no attention whatsoever to popular music. So, I've seen the Dirty Projectors albums have come out, I've given a listen, I've thought about reviewing them. I don't hate them, much like this album. I just heard it and just said, I don't really have anything to say about it. So last week, when it seemed like there wasn't too much new music I wanted to review, I put up a poll in the community section of this page. And overwhelmingly, the thing that got the most votes, the most comments, was please Skye review Adrianne Lenker's album Songs. So this is the thing. As a teacher, it's a really good idea to listen to your students. And as a YouTuber, it's a really good idea to listen to the people who consistently, intentionally listen to you, okay? Like people who choose to spend their time saying that they want to hear what you think. So I'm like, all right, fine. I'm gonna give it another listen. I didn't hate it. We'll see if something happens. And yesterday, at breakfast, I was sitting there and my kids were off to their virtual classes or whatever. And I was there and I had my headphones in and I was listening to this album. And the whole time, you see, my main issue with this album has always been that it's just basically overdubbed guitars, so 2 guitars, and this singing voice, which I don't particularly love. It's a little bit breathy, a little bit high. It's good, it's a talented voice, but it's not particularly that engaging to me. So I just sort of had this sort of feeling of sort of sameness, and I was kind of bored of listening to the album passively as I had in the past. So here I am, and I'm listening to this album, and a single line from the album, just a single line, affected me so greatly that I literally broke down into tears. Now, I cry a fair amount. If you watch this channel, you know I'm very in touch with my weepy weepies. But usually when this happens, I'm sort of expecting it to happen. Like it's a musician who already moves me, or it's something that I know it's happening, or the song kind of builds up to it. In this case, it was like a lightning bolt. It was a line of such simplicity, of such beauty, and it resonated so deeply with how I have felt in my life that still to this day, like, a day later, I've listened to the song 2 or 3 times, and I still get a little bit emotional listening to that line. I think about it when I'm not listening to it. What line is it? Well, I'm gonna get to it. It's in the album. I'll give it to you in the review. I don't want to put it out of context. So this was like a break point, and I just realized that this album has this power. This is why all of my auditors have been telling you, Skye, you've got to review it. Because I had to hang with it. Because I think the reason that this album is so great, and the reason why I'm recommending it for you to listen to, is this very quiet power that it has. This one line had this ability to just absolutely knock me out emotionally. And I think the reason why is because this is a love album, right? But it's not, oh, I love you, you're the greatest. And it's not, I loved you, why did we break up? It's not, I loved you, but I hate you. The whole thing is just about love and longing. And it is an amazingly good depiction of longing, and not even necessarily longing for one person. It's not lust. It's not like, oh, this one person is it. It's sort of a meditation on what kind of relationship would she like to have? What is it that she's looking for? More importantly, what is it that she needs to have some sense of intimacy or safety or place? Essentially, what she's describing is the search for true love. And I don't mean true love in the Cinderella sense or the Shrek sense or whatever. This isn't some kind of fairy tale. This is like a true love where you feel like safe and cared for. And that is so unbelievably powerful and so moving that I ended up completely not only forgiving but appreciating the sound of the album with these two guitars going, because it just gave space to these lyrics. And what's weird is that if you're listening passively, you don't always pick up the lyrics, because it's not like her voice sort of like cuts through like a knife. It's sort of, it rides right on top of the guitar lines, and it creates this kind of fabric. The whole album has kind of a blanket feel. Like you just sort of like get kind of wrapped up in the album. And then if you pay attention, you just hear these moments. And I think if you listen, and part of the reason I'm not giving you the line that made me cry yet is because I don't want to color your opinion of the whole album. I think most human beings, if they listened carefully to this album, would have a similar reaction at some point. I don't think they'd have the same reaction to the same line. But she has this ability to be sort of superhuman. And I don't mean like Superman. I mean like very human, like really relate, really use the poetic tools of sort of slightly opaque, slightly vague symbolism and detail to just absolutely knock you out emotionally. So it is a very, very good album that I highly suggest. It's also a good example of one of our very good COVID albums that we're getting now, right? It's just, if you look at the credits, it's just her and an engineer. And I think we're going to get more music like this as artists who have a lot to say, have the need to say it, feel compelled to say it, and they no longer have the tools to express themselves normally. They're going to do it in this other way. And this is sort of like a artistic outgassing, I would suppose, where just like there's this buildup of creativity and you just kind of let it out. So it's really quite amazing. And I'm going to play you some of it soon, and you can kind of hear. And maybe the entire sound will completely turn you off and you won't even give it a chance. But I think it's worth it. I'm going to go kind of track by track through this album, which I've read described as sparse, but I wouldn't really call it sparse. It's actually, I would call it pretty lush. It's just not very, there's not a lot of instruments, okay? So, I mean, sparse is where you listen and you hear a lot of silence and you hear a lot of sort of like pauses. This album is pretty consistent. Guitar, 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 voice, guitar, guitar, guitar. I'm going to go track by track here, opening up with the first track, To Reverse, which just shows this lush, like kind of running guitar lines, and the vocals are following. On the second listen, I liked it more and more. What I found interesting was there's this line where she says, "Grandma Juniper, tell me your recipe." And there's sort of one of these themes. A lot of the themes in this album appear to be about the difficulty of returning home. Sort of returning to your childhood home. I looked up on Wikipedia. I think she's maybe 29, so that puts her in that range of where going back home to your family home is a sort of weirdly existential crisis. It's like a weird period, sort of after college, a couple years after college, where going back home feels like you're on a different planet. Eventually, you just, you kind of grow out of that, and you're just sort of like, yep, this is another place. But this whole sense of like this idea of trying to get home, and then tying it in with her grandmother, and then tell me your recipe, like that's one of these little details that I imagine could get you. It doesn't get me. No, my family doesn't really cook. My family cooks now, but it didn't used to. So I don't have an idea of like a real family recipe, but just this little tiny detail. And then lyrically, it's quite interesting because the song's called To Reverse. And so she says Grandma Juniper, and then like 5 lines later, she says To Reverse. And I think that she chose maybe her grandmother's name is Juniper, I don't know. But I think that she created this name to sound kind of nature, natural. This album's drenched in nature. But also to have it rhyme with this To Reverse later. Just say those words together. Juniper, To Reverse, Juniper, To Reverse. It's a very nice, it's a good indication of not only her ability to write interesting words, but to find interesting sounds within those words. Speaking of grandmothers, apparently, according to some article I read, the cover of the album is this. Speaking of nature, how it's drenched in nature, there's bird sounds everywhere. The official videos are just pictures of trees. And these flowers here are apparently done by her grandmother. So I think that's a pretty good indication of this sense of returning and nature and this personal this personal and natural self-portrait that can be universal if you listen to it properly. The next track, Ingyar, I don't know what that means, kind of goes on and on with this concept of everything. Oh, and if you do know what that means, please tell me, by the way. Because I'm a professor, people often think that I know everything, but it's actually the opposite. Because I'm a professor, it means that I don't know that much. So if there's some point that I'm making, feel free to like correct me if I'm totally wrong, because it's way more interesting to be corrected than it is to be correct. So Ingdiar, which I don't know what that means. I didn't look up that much. I don't do too much research. I try to just experience the music as much as I can as itself. It just repeats over and over again in the chorus, everything eats and is eaten. And that's sort of one of the darker tones on the album. This album kind of vacillates between a sort of bittersweet sense of longing and a sort of certainty of ending. And this kind of has that sort of certainty of ending. Everything eats and is eaten. But again, it's in this greater theme of nature, and that is the truth about nature, is that everything eats and is eaten. We all consume and produce. The next track is called Anything. Hey, you've been waiting around 11 minutes. You want to find the song that made your professor cry? That would be this one. So, the song seemed kind of annoying to me at first. Kind of Bon Iver-ish, especially it reminds me of the song Holocene, just in the way the guitars are played. But the voices aren't like altered or super weird, they're just kind of doubled. And the whole song is about this sense of longing and not wanting a fantasy, but wanting a family. And already, this is what I'm talking about. That to have an album where you're not looking for a fantasy, you're looking for a family, and have that sound romantic, not needy, right? Because that's the thing. I mean, if someone told you, I don't want to be your fantasy, I want to be your family, just back up, right? And just get the hell out of there. It's not a good line on a first date. But this album isn't about a first date. It's not about seduction. It seems to be about this sense of what do you want. So before I get to the line that got me, I'm just going to play you a little bit of it so you get a sense of what her voice sounds like, what the guitar sounds like, how it all kind of comes together. What is the texture of this musical blanket? So I'm not really doing it justice by playing it like that, because that's not really the way you should listen to this album. You should listen to it quite intently. But in there is the line, and this is the line. I want to sleep in your car while you are driving. So in the context of the rest of this song, I don't want to talk about anything. I want to kiss your eyes. I want to witness your eyes looking. This whole thing of like, let's not talk. Let's just be together. Let's have this closeness without having to mediate it through words. I don't want to talk about anyone. I want to sleep in your car while you're driving, lay in your lap when I'm crying. You'd think maybe the crying line would be the line that would get me to cry, but it isn't. But it's this idea of I want to sleep in your car while you're driving. And the reason this hits me, and it might not hit you in the same way, is, everyone has an interesting time growing up. I spent way too much time in my youth in cars where people who were driving were drunk, okay? I survived, hooray, good for me. But that is not a good way to exist, right? Like that feeling is legitimately traumatic, right? Because you feel like you're going to die and you have no control over it. You're completely out of control. And this does a weird thing to you. And on a sort of larger scale, not just driving, but just emotionally, you find that when people are supposed to be there for you and taking care of you, you can no longer trust them, okay? So that makes me the world's worst front seat driver. I'm okay in the back seat, but if I'm in the front seat, I am looking at every single car around me. I'm like, oh, that guy's drunk. I'm convinced everyone else is drunk when I'm driving. Oh, that guy's on poppers. Oh boy, that guy's stoned. Like I'm looking at everybody. I'm like trying to pay attention to the construction. I'm paying attention to how fast things are going, to the road conditions. I just can't calm down. And when I reach a point in a relationship, and this doesn't happen very often. And this doesn't have to be romantic, by the way. This can be my best friend, Brad. He was the first person I ever fell asleep with a car with. But when I could just sit back and do that awkward thing of trying to get my neck right, which I never could quite do, and then put my head against the window, and then it's too cold, and that whole dance of trying to sleep in a car. Like, that was one of the greatest moments of my life that I didn't even understand was meaningful. Like, I didn't understand that as meaningful, that I had created relationships where I felt safe and held and cared for. And that is what is in this music. That's that quiet power that I'm talking about. I must have listened to the song 3 times before it affected me like that. Because it's just, bring, 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 right? That's just what I heard. But then I took it on a deeper level, and I realized that this sense of longing, this lyric, is a goddamn masterpiece. This is what lyrics can do at their absolute best. Simply state a human truth of unexpected power. Like, it's just simple. I want to sleep in your car while you're driving. Most people who hear it just think, oh, they want to go on road trips together. And maybe that's what she means. Maybe she doesn't have these same issues that I do. I don't even know, right? I don't know about Adrianne. I don't even know how to pronounce her name. Should I go full French? Adrianne Lenker? Or is it Adrianne? I can't tell how you pronounce it. I don't even know how to pronounce her name, but I do know that this expresses that very human and very interesting need to be cared for and safe in a relationship. Right? This is a good reason to listen to this album. God, I can be so snobby sometimes when I was dismissing this. Next track is called Heavy Focus. Some more great lyrics. Terrifying like a gun store. The wind roared, invisible like a blank. Ghost blanket, no trees bent. Shaky like the first dance, shaky like the first time. Our palms met in a calm sweat. Excellent, interesting plays, like small, like internal rhymes, longer rhymes, and just these little turns of phrase that she has. Shaky like the first dance. Again, I mean, that is a real poetic power to that line. Shaky like the first dance. You can tell that I paid a lot more attention to the album after that song, because the next time I listened, I was like basically writing down every lyric. Half Return is the best guitar work on the album. It's got this kind of like double guitar going up, and it's just everything about the guitar on this album is just so clean. It's just very clean guitar lines, very acoustic. There's nothing electronic about this album as far as I can tell, but just very, very clean lines. And there's even a kind of guitar solo at the end, which is nice. It's not like some kind of blistering guitar solo, right? It's just it's somebody who is not a lead guitarist playing a guitar solo, which usually means they're simple, they're sweet, and they're melodic. And this seems to be about going back home as a young adult. So the other theme of the album I've been talking about, there's this sort of longing, and then there's this question of your sense of place. Standing in the yard, dressed like a kid, the house is white and the lawn is dead. Again, should you ever return to your childhood home, if you have ever left? I think this is a pretty good way of saying it. Like standing in the yard dressed like a kid, feeling like you haven't grown up past the point where you are. The house is white and the lawn is dead. And just like the lawn is being dead, the vibrance, the youth that was you in that house, that was the life in that house that you knew, is no longer there. You're just going back to a dead place. Also a reference to a plastic swing set, which is a nice image. The track Come is interesting because the guitar is almost like a synthesizer loop, the way it's created, but the song's a little bit just too dark for me. I couldn't parse out what it's about. I don't know. Come help me die, my daughter. I don't know. It's not that it's a bad song, but it was just a little too dark for me. I don't want to think about telling my daughter to come die with me. That could just be me. Next track is called Zombie Girl, which is another excellent track. Reminds me a lot of Tambourine Man by Bob Dylan, just the way that it's sung. But again, just amazing lyrics, lots of bird sounds in the background, great atmosphere all the way throughout this album. Sleep paralysis, I sworn I could have felt you there, and I almost could have kissed your hair, but the emptiness withdrew me from any kind of wishful prayer. That's a beautiful lyric. The emptiness withdrew me. Like, even just that. Forget the from any kind of wishful prayer. Just the sense of the emptiness withdrawing you, right? Emptiness doesn't have any power in theory, right? Emptiness is the lack of anything. But it's the emptiness that withdraws her. Oh, emptiness, tell me about your nature. Maybe I've been getting it all wrong. So an interesting idea that maybe this zombie girl who she's with, I don't know if this is like her lover or her friend, or I really don't know anything about Adrianne Lenker, except that she was in that band, and I used to not like this album. I don't know who this is. I get the sense the zombie girl sounds like her lover. And so maybe this idea is that like the emptiness of a zombie, someone who just consumes, who eats and is eaten. All fits. Wait a minute. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just working through this right now. I think that works actually really well with that Adrianne song, where that is what a zombie is. A zombie eats and is eaten. And a zombie is kind of an empty vessel of consuming, right? Like that's what our modern zombies mean. Not the original zombies, but the modern zombies. Just like figures of consuming, who just consume and who have been consumed. So maybe this sort of emptiness, this spiritual emptiness that she's talking about, she seems to be drawn to the spiritual emptiness. Like maybe instead of being this amazing, vibrant poet who's doing all these things, she should just be a zombie girl saying, you know, brains, right? Or whatever the equivalent of brains is. Money, watches, sex, right? It ends with the song, with the line, "What's on your mind?" And I've known a lot of people in a lot of relationships. That's a stupid sentence. But I've known a lot of people in a lot of relationships, and I would say that's the number one question that helps to break apart relationships, is having one person just say, "What's on your mind?" Like not being able to know what's happening. But that's interesting because maybe she's talking to the zombie girl, and she says, "What's on your mind?" And what she wants to hear is, you know, "I want to kiss your eyes and see you watch me." But what the zombie girl is really thinking, brains, I don't know. Not a lot, just forever. Has another one of the set of lyrics that I imagine could be very moving to a lot of people. Your greatest fantasy is to grow a baby. I could be a good mother and I want to be your wife. So I hold you to my knife and I steal you to your letter. Not a lot, just forever. So I don't quite know what this means. Like, I don't love you a lot, just forever. I think that's what that means. But this theme of like feeling the desire to have a family, but there's always a bittersweetness. And throughout this whole album, there's a lot of bittersweetness. I mean, that whole thing that I was talking about that made me cry, the whole like, you know, I wanna sleep in a car while you're driving. She's not saying, "I'm so happy that I'm sleeping in the car while you're driving." She's saying, "This is what I want." She seems to want a lot of things that she's not particularly confident she's going to be getting, which is what makes this album, gives it a little bit more of a strength, I suppose, because it's about this longing, not about this having attained it. Dragon Eye, the last two tracks are called Dragon Eyes and My Angel, and if you play them both backwards, the song Angel Eyes by ABBA starts playing. Dragon Eyes is really nice and haunting. She sings super close to the mic. This is the most like intimate, and this is a very intimate album, but this is the most intimate of it. And just this lyric, "I just want a place with you." And these lyrics are quite interesting because she's always talking about how she doesn't want to blame the person she's with, doesn't want to change the person she's with. She just wants a place with you. And this is going back again to that line that I was talking about, that I've been talking about the whole time, that what is it that she's looking for? A place with someone, which is so goddamn powerful. It really is. Then the album ends with My Angel, which itself cuts off really roughly. So I'm going to cut off this review roughly and not even review that last song. I'm not going to review it because I don't think I need to review every single thing on here. I think the whole album has its strength. I think that the whole album has that emotional power, that silent, that quiet power that I really suggest you take some time, you listen to. Go on her website and read the lyrics while you listen to the album, and I think you'll find that's a pretty good way to spend an hour. Okay, well, until next time, I'm gonna dry my tears, and I have to teach quite soon. What am I teaching? I'm teaching a class of 111, and I'm teaching, not negation. Oh, I'm teaching the verbs prendre and boire, to take and to drink, as well as partitive articles. Tough stuff. Okay, well, if you have any comments about this video, please let me know. You can subscribe if you want. I like it when people subscribe. And there's the camera.